The tube jig is back, and I say back because a lot of people, and myself included, forgot about this useful tool when the drop shot came out. We were catching so many fish on the drop shot, we all just put the tube jig away and just used that drop shot. But there's a time and a place for both, and it's a really useful tool. There's a few different ways that you can rig it depending on the situation. The first one is really the simplest and probably the most common. It's really just with an internal jig head. The internal tube jig head has got this lean, kind of narrow lead, so you can get it in the back of the bait. So what you do, you take the bait, you turn it upside down, you take the jig head, and you really just push it through the back. So once I've got it all the way in, as far as it'll go up to the bend, at the top of the jig head, what I'll do is I'll take my fingernail there, and I'll just pierce that eye through so that I can tie it on to my bait. So I've got that eye through, I'll tie it on, and I'm ready to go. It's a great way to fish the tube jig if you're fishing rock, if you're fishing open water. If there's really nothing around to get caught up on, that's the way to be doing it. Now the other option for me is I like to flip a tube jig every once in a while. It gives the fish a little bit of a different look. They're used to seeing jigs, craws, creature baits, a whole bunch of different things. You put a tube jig in front of them, you'll definitely get an extra bite. So for me, I'm just fishing it like a normal Texas rig. So I usually use a 2/0 wide gap hook. It usually fits my tube jig properly. I'll pierce it in the nose there just like that, slide it around just like any other Texas rig, turn it at the bend, line it up, and again, the big thing with the tube jig, just like any other Texas rig, is to keep it nice and straight. So for me, what I then do, I always peg my weight because I'm usually fishing heavier vegetation with it. When I'm flipping, slide my weight down, and I've got a Texas rigged tube jig. I can flip it in any sorts of situations. Now the last way that I'll rig a tube jig, it's a little different. I like to fish a tube jig with docks because, you know, around docks you really got to skip it up in there, and the tube jig really does skip well. It also gives them a little bit different look than a Senko or jig or anything else that people have been using. And what I do with my tube jig to be able to rig it properly for a dock is I internally weight it, but just like the jig head, I don't want to have that hook exposed. I'm going to get caught on the dock. So I do internally weight it, but I use a Texas rig style rig as well. So I take an internal weight here. It's just a flat weight with an open top so I can secure it within the jig. I turn my tube jig upside down, just like I did with the jig head. I'm going to place it in, the weight into the back of the tube jig with that opening up, and slide it down as far as I can. So I'm going to push it all the way through till it gets to the nose. Now that that weight is at the nose, I know there's that opening. So I'm going to take my Texas rig hook, I'm going to take the hook, I'm going to put it just in the front, and I'm going to feel around. There we go. I make sure I get it in the nose of that the weight so it stays secure. I take it, bring it into the bend just like a Texas rig, my last one, bring it through, and there we go. So now I've got a weightless Texas rigged tube jig that I can skip around a whole bunch of different pilings or docks or anything else that I want to. It's not going to get hung up, and it's weighted enough that it's going to sink properly, and I can get a good skip or a good cast. So next time you're on the water, don't forget about the tube jig and pick a way to rig it that's going to fit the situation.